10x your service design offering with Smapply. Take 20% off any order with This Is HCD 20 off. Let's superpower you and your design team's potential. Sign up at smapply.app. Enjoy the episode from your friends at Smapply, helping support This Is HCD podcast.
We just came together for a weekend and we're like, maybe we're service designers. And that was the moment. And then when I think Chris just registered the company and told us if we didn't show up on the 1st of January, then he'd do it on his own.
Hello and welcome to Bringing Design Closer, and this is HCD. Our goal is to have conversations that inspire and help move the dial forward for organisations to become more human-centred in their approach to solving complex business and societal problems. Now, before we jump in, I have a favour to ask. I've personally been creating content for This is HCD for nearly 6 years now, all for the love of sharing knowledge to the global design community. And one thing that you could do is leave a review, preferably a 5-star one, as it helps grow our community and helps the findability of our podcast across the networks like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts too. And even if you don't have a chance to leave a review, you can go one better by just telling your friends or the people that you work with about This is HCD. It helps us out so much, okay? Now, in this episode, I speak with Ben Reason, founding partner of Livework in the UK, and Ben has co-authored Service Design from Insight to Implementation on Rosenfeld Media, and also Service Design for Business, a practical guide to optimizing the customer experience, released in 2016. Now, in this conversation, we chat about a few things, but mainly around Ben's own journey through design, starting at Liverpool in the mid-90s, and his entry into the world of service design later on that decade with Livework. Now, we chat about the work that Livework do and also a new framework titled Three Velocities of Change. We want to understand what this means, where it originated, and also why this is so important, not only to Ben, but to the Livework team. It's a great one. Let's jump straight in. Ben, it is fantastic to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Gerry.
Long-time fan, first-time caller. You've written some of the seminal service design books, and you're obviously founder of Livework, one of the pioneers of service design globally. But for our listeners, I've given you a bit of an intro there, but for our listeners, maybe describe what you do on a day-to-day basis, and also where you're based as well.
Yeah, so start with the easy one. I'm based in London, day to day. So letting you kind of in on it a bit, I kind of finally took on being the boss at Livework, even though we've been around for 20 years, but it's always been a sort of a joint effort. And then I'm the last founder standing. Yeah. So it's a relatively new role, 2 or 3 years into doing that. So it's a mix. I work with the leadership team and kind of, I am their line manager, all these new terms that we have been introducing as we've grown up. I still do a lot of, work in kind of business development work. And then it's a sort of a third, the final third being working with some of the project teams or some of the teams, and particularly around, when we're pushing things a little bit. So, we've been pushing what we're calling sustainable futures over the last few years. So when we've got projects where we're doing something we haven't done before, I like to get involved.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let's go back to the start, if you don't mind. Like, so what did you study in university? Because I know we spoke before about that whole kind of transition period of coming out of university and into a world. What did that world look like back then? Were people driving cars?
Yeah,
so joking, it wasn't that long ago.
I graduated in 95 with a degree in fine art. So I kind of came out with the false notion that I was going to be an artist and rented a studio from one of my former tutors. Yeah. And then found it very cold and lonely and realized art school is great because you're full of like-minded people and you're kind of in this environment. But when you're on your own, I realized I wasn't a sort of a lone wolf kind of worker, and I needed human beings around me. So I in that time I was I bought a Mac with some money that I was left and was making animations with it that I thought were art. And I showed a friend and he said, "Oh, you could come cut up JPEGs for us in our studio and help us make CD-ROMs. So I kind of fell into digital and then the internet through a kind of a luck of timing. I always feel like if I was a few years younger, there would have been lots of design graduates who knew what they were doing. But
you were kind of lucky in that sense, in that the timing, where there was a sort of an interest in the internet. 95 was kind of an interesting. Windows 95 dropped as well, of course. That kind of was a bit of a game changer. So what did that look like in terms of strategic design? Because, say, the double diamond hadn't been created, if you look at that as being a moment from the design council. So there was interest about using design, but what did design look like in 95 when you finished, as regards opportunities for design to evoke change?
So I think the first job that I got that was more than Mac Monkey work was with a kind of early stage company that was emerging out of the sort of marketing. The directors were from a marketing advertising background, and they were exploring the internet. So we were primarily making websites and actually digital advertising stuff. I don't think, not particularly strategically. It was like that at that stage where you've got this new medium and you're trying to figure out if it's of any use to the companies that you're working with. And it's kind of fascinating because they were, we were working with all these brands who were just trying to put adverts on the internet, and it was kind of dumb, I think. And then we stumbled across the first thing that I felt was meaningful was we did some work for the Royal Automobile Club, or the RAC in the UK, which is the breakdown insurance company, where we were actually putting some services together, like route finder services and other things that might actually support their members or motorists. So that was the first time I was like, oh, you can use this for something interesting.
Yeah.
And that kind of steered me. So I did feel like at that time there was a career fork. I was working with these guys who were from, proper the Bartle Bogle Hegarty people who were like, and they were like, come and make ads with us. And then I was like, no, I think I want to make something that's actually useful and more like practical for people. So that kind of took me down a path into, carrying on working with what we called web design at the time.
So your first introduction to service design, what did that look like? Because I probably had heard of service design in the mid 2000s, and I'm keen to hear what your experience was around that period of where you saw the light.
So this is the sort of Livework foundational myth and truth. So I was, folks. Where's the drum roll? It is a bit like that. I mean, I feel a bit bashful about it, but so I was working with this web company that was building websites, and we were doing projects. We built the first Ocado website, and we built some websites for quite a few startups, like a real estate startup, and so these were services that we were making, or we get hired by a bank to try and put them on the internet. And then I met Chris Downs, who was my fellow founder at Livework, and we just hit it off and had a lot of fun, and but we're also kind of fed up with the firm we were working with, and it was kind of a technology-led firm, that was the bulk of their revenue. So we decided, we sort of were like fantasizing about starting a design firm, and then we brought Lavrans over from Scandinavia, who the two of them had been at the Royal College together.
Okay.
At the same time, I was doing a master's. It was called Responsibility and Business Practice. So I was trying to figure out how to do something more meaningful and around ecological issues. And I read a book that had a chapter that was about services, and services being a way to drive resource efficiency. A guy called Amory Lovins and Paul Hawkins. So they were talking about things like car sharing, and I was like, oh, that's like my in. That's where I could be useful to this issue. If I can make services that make us use less stuff in the world and create less waste. Lavrans and Chris had been talking about the fact that they were both industrial design trained, but they'd always worked in the service sector.
Yeah.
So they were kind of having a designerly existential moment, and we just came together for a weekend, and we're like, maybe we're service designers, and that was the moment. And then we I think Chris just registered the company and told us if we didn't show up on the 1st of January, then he'd do it on his own. And we set off. So we were quite deliberately sort of saying this, then we did our research. We found that there was service design big at Margaret in Cologne, then Showstack's service blueprinting work that IDEO had done. But we were aware there weren't any firms that were service design pure kind of play. So we were on early days. It was a very experimental, try and prove that this is
2000, 2001, was it?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it was around that period. So, that whole kind of journey, I didn't really realize that your master's had such a sustainable perspective in it. And it kind of has emerged, as you said there, or alluded to maybe 10 minutes ago, it's kind of emerged out of the I guess the brand, if you want, in the last 4 or 5 years, and it's kind of permeating everything that Livework is doing. It kind of makes sense now if Chris and Lavrans have left and you're there now. It's kind of it's Ben's baby, and that stuff can effectively grow. So, what are the challenges that you see from the existing world of service design at the moment? Like, what's holding us back?
Right.
To get to this point where we can actually start thinking about creating more ethical and sustainable services?
I guess what's holding us back is we're just one part of the existing system, right? And we're geared up to work within that system. So there's been a lot of discussion and soul searching by designers about things that we design and the impacts that they have, the things that we make desirable, and the general alignment of design, especially in a kind of commercial setting with a consumer economy. So we're kind of part of that system. So there's a bit of a recognition of that, and then I think the other interesting discussion going on is whether the concept of human centricity is part of the problem. If we're your prior. And if you go, I do kind of read a lot, and then if you sort of dig into some of the kind of more ecological thinkers, they will say something similar about how humanity has kind of separated itself from its environment, as if we're different, as if we're kind of floating above it, or as if we can just use it for our own ends, and we've lost touch with our connections and our dependencies and things like that. So I guess you could, human-centered design is part of the humanistic worldview that we're in. So is that answering your questions? Kind of holding us?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's kind of the whole bigger question really is, if that's what's holding us back, what about the work that you're doing at the moment around the Three Horizons, and how do you see that that's going to sort of unlock an awful lot of those resistance points? Like for maybe before we get into that, let's talk about, I'm calling it Three Horizons, sorry, but it's the Three Velocities is the proper term. You can smack me. So it's let's talk about where this came from first of all, because you sent this to me a couple of months ago, and I was like, oh, okay, this is pretty interesting.
So you rightly noted that I guess this issue has been a concern of mine for a long time, but it sort of went away, and I found the world of sustainability, which is kind of called, didn't have very any inroads for design. It seemed to be a very technical world of kind of counting carbon emissions, and so we got distracted and did other things at Livework. But about probably 2018, there was a combination of me wanting to push things forward, but also quite a few of the younger Live workers coming and saying, we can't. What's our position on this? I'm not happy for us to pretend it doesn't exist. And then Extinction Rebellion kicked off in the UK, and my partner was like, "Come and join me. I'm on a bridge, blocking a bridge over the Thames." And I literally came from a client workshop with a folder full of post-its and scribbles from some kind of corporate brainstorm, and ended up with all the rebels on the bridge, and which was really catalyzing. So there's that. There was that. That was you asking about kind of where it comes from. But I guess I found some of the. I think it's quite a big challenge for design, and I found some of the debate about, okay, so we just move from, this is not fair, but you kind of move from human centricity to planet centric or something.
Yeah,
doesn't quite answer the question for me about what do we actually do, and are we actually challenging? Do we have? Is design still relevant? If it is, if you think design comes from industrialization and the need to, make these commodity products that are useful, usable, and desirable, is it still relevant in a world where we need to challenge some of those thoughts?
Yeah.
So the Three Velocities is it's kind of an early stage concept for where we think Livework can be useful to clients in, I guess, the ecological transition. So the three things we're saying is the sort of the one velocity is understanding, which is probably a slow burn kind of mindset shift into a more ecological way of thinking. Another one is acceleration. So there are certain things we need to do really fast, like transition to renewable energies. And the third one is we're calling prepare, which is a bit more of a futures facing. There are changes that we might need to be ready for that maybe we don't know if they're coming or not. And in some ways, these three things are three things that you can see in the world. So if you sort of look at the world and how different groups of people are responding to, say, climate change, some people are saying, well, we need to sort of philosophically change. Other people are saying, well, we just need to change technologies very, very fast, and we can answer this with technology. And other people are kind of prepping and going out and setting up new community. So I quite like the idea that these things are disparate, but actually they're all relevant, and they are all different modes of kind of parallel thought. And just to finish off your question, so I think there's still a question like what's the design role in here?
Yeah.
So I think we're feeling like the understand thing is about retuning design empathy to think beyond human beings and start thinking about systems.
Absolutely.
And the accelerate is sorry.
No, I was just going to say on the understand piece, because when I initially saw it, I'm probably not the first person to say that. I was like, I'm a bit confused about the understand piece and why it looks like over time the effort decreases. When typically, if you look at wicked problems, to use that term, the closer you get to the problem, it exponentially increases, and it shouldn't diminish the amount of effort required to understand, is my take on it. And I was like, okay, I might be missing something here, and I'd love to be able to speak to Ben about this. And I was like, oh, hang on,
brilliant.
Podcast a couple of weeks.
Oh, thanks, Gerry. So we did put this. So Gerry's referring to a graph that we have with
which
these
I'll put a link
velocities.
in the show notes.
Yeah, and the understand one does sort of start off intensively and then become a kind of an ongoing thing. And it might not be right. You're not the only person to question this, and I think the understanding might be something that actually builds over time. We're taking the feedback on. I guess the thought was it's probably a slower. Mind shift change doesn't happen so quickly, so it's probably an ongoing slow burn kind of thing. But colleagues of mine were thinking it also needs to start with quite a kind of an intensive piece of work to understand like what is the situation. So you are.
Yeah. Okay. So
you're on the money.
Well, we all love to be challenged, but let's talk about the accelerate piece, okay? Because I'm interested in the use of language as well. Okay. Where did this come from, the term accelerate, and how does it differ to, say, different frameworks that, and I guess it's not really a framework. I'm interested to see why there's a need for speed. I cannot believe I've said that phrase again, because that's the third podcast in a row I've quoted Top Gun.
There you go. So beyond it being exhilarating, you mean? Why is that?
And wingmen and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, the really simple answer is you've seen things like these reports around climate change is that there's only so long for a transition to take place. So, the need to move from a fossil energy system to a renewable energy system, and the speed is a critical factor. And I think there's a guy called Alex Stefan, if anyone is interested in kind of ecological and design. He's an amazing writer. And he's been talking about, speed being as important as the change. Like late is also a problem. It's not like, I guess, other transitions where the deadline is less critical. But also, it's quite interesting because part of this has come from observing work that we've been doing with clients, and we've worked with some car manufacturers who are on that electric vehicle transition.
Yeah,
and there are deadlines from government about when they have to stop making petrol cars. And the kind of the urgency that you can feel from them is quite different from other work we've had. And the other part of it is a sort of a need to really focus and not do a whole load of stuff that you might normally do. Like there's some real basics that need to be put in place, and you can't. What we've seen on some of those projects as well as we're used to kind of all of these additional features and kind of, so if I give you an example, a kind of electric vehicle transition, do you really need a loyalty program that goes with that? Or do you just really want to focus on the core business, which is supporting people to adopt a different kind of vehicle? That's, I think, the thing.
Okay. So the bit that I'm kind of, I understand, I don't want to say the need for speed again, but I understand acceleration. Okay. Like an accelerate is there. Is there some sort of an innovation loop happening, whereas you can test the hypothesis, the prototypes, and get them in and get that feedback loop and build on it? Like, is that what I'm seeing here in terms of it being a cyclical process, or is it just a case of getting that massive change and doing it quicker?
I think that's why we've been discussing it. For everyone, this is early stage kind of hypothetical thoughts, but we're kind of hoping that the prepare work pops out things that then become accelerated when the timing is right. So for an organization to accelerate something, it has to be very clearly the right thing to do, whereas there are lots of unknowns and kind of maybes around there. So I think that the prepare work is probably going to have a lot of ideas in it that sit there. And one thing we've been discussing in terms of innovation is, so my colleague Yelta sort of said, it's not so much kill your darlings anymore, it's like chill your darlings and wait for the right time.
I love that.
Isn't that good?
Oh yeah. You should make t-shirts with that.
Okay, we'll do that.
That's cool. That gets the reaction going from me.
We can wear them at all the geeky conferences.
And I mean, like, as you said, like this is it's an exploratory piece that you're doing. And I guess at this stage, what are you hoping to achieve by putting this out into the wild? Is conversation one of them? Because we're here talking about it is one thing.
Yeah, and sort of pull ourselves forward in some way, but also provide a framework where we can kind of look at the work we're doing in this space and say, what's the balance that we need. We've done one piece of work which has kind of touched all three, where we've looked at the sort of, so creating a community of practice around design for sustainability within an organization. So you've got that kind of understand piece going on, and then they're prioritizing certain things that they're taking forward, but they're also thinking longer term, like what's our compass. So useful to sort of codify something that was, let's say, an early indicative methodology. But yeah, and obviously we're trying to match something we can do with something that organizations need. So there's a commercial aspect to it.
One of the things that struck me, Ben, and this is not me being anyway facetious, is the work that you're doing now and how it seems to have matched the design culture. Okay, so the culture that you've built over the last 15, 20 years, okay, I don't know what it was like in 2010s and stuff, but it seems that there's been careful curation happening around the people that I've spoken to, because there's been a number of live workers that I've spoken to over the last couple of months. How have you managed this in terms of the hiring process, and how do you maintain the design culture? Because, as you said, they came to you in 2018 and they go, "What's our position on this? Like, how are we going to respond to these things?" And it sounds like, in somewhat, the employees have risen, and they've kind of asked the questions, and you've responded. I'd love to get your thoughts about what you've done to enable that design culture, because I think a lot of people will be really interested in that, and especially if you're now able to, as you say, go into the final third and convert that into meaningful work.
Yeah. I think that's a tricky question. It's like, in your sort of self-reflective element of it. What do I know? So I think we've always been encouraged a kind of an openness about, so there aren't kind of, we don't shut down people's questions or doubts or things. Either generally, over time, people, and I guess it also starts with me. I mean, I've always been, this is something I've talked about all the time. So it's a kind of an open door. On a more formal side, and actually to sort of address your earlier question about like what the challenge is to the design world, we did kick off a process last year that's taken most of the year. We did sort of deliberately taken our time around like just renewing or updating Livework's purpose statement, or we didn't have one. We had kind of different mission, vision stuff, but we was like, okay, what's the company purpose? And had a lot of conversations around it. And the first time we kind of opened the discussion, and I think I scared everybody by sharing some sort of more bleak eco thought, including this guy Alex Stefan. But there's a sort of a fear factor involved here about stepping into the unknown. I think we all swim in this human-centric water, and it's second nature, and it's it's kind of how we define who we are to some extent. So to sort of say, well, we're going to do, it's like, do I need to go back to school, or do I need to challenge my clients in a different way that I'm not used to, and I'm not sure if I've got the data or the the gravitas to do that. So that's fear is always just sort of something that holds you back, isn't it? So I mean, that's the one thing I can say we've done over the last year, to deliberately say, this is a collective thing. You're not on your own. We've talked about saying we're going to have this kind of, the sustainability lens is something that we bring to all projects, even if the client says, well, that's not relevant for now. And also we've been running a kind of sustainable futures in stealth mode. So we've picked a few clients where we've said, let's just have the conversation in the background.
Yeah.
And if you feel comfortable, you can see whether some of these questions are relevant. And it's been really successful, actually. So, we work with some clients where this hasn't been part of the brief or the contract that we've had.
You bring them in.
We bring it in. And actually, in terms of, I think part of what's important is figuring out where our kind of spaces where we do have permission and value. So we've deliberately said we're not the people who have to shout and scream at companies and say, you need to sort your shit out and stuff. Most firms will have some kind of statement and intent, but it really needs translating into what they actually do. And all of the difficult bit, which is the more, I think, it does design space.
I'm seeing a pattern between, the founding of Livework and where you're at now. Like, in terms of Chris Down saying, I've registered the domain, you show up for work here now, and then you go find the work. And 2018, change happens, founders, whatever.
Yeah.
And now you're at that point again where it's like there's an element of, I don't want to say risk taking, but you're happy to throw it up in the air somewhat and just saying, well, this is what we believe in, like you did way back in 2001, saying this is what we believe. We see this, and now you see it now. Okay. In terms of your preparedness for the next 10 years, where do you see the critical skills being within Livework? And what are you doing to kind of work with that?
Yeah. So I like that observation, Joe. I think it's almost our strengths and our weaknesses. We're always like looking at the next thing and, being a kind of, it's always like, oh, that's an interesting challenge. We're not very good at rinse and repeat, which is also, a business.
I picked that up.
A business challenge. So the things I think with another thing which we've been doing for quite some time now is deepening our ability to work with the organizational change. So we had, I think probably 10 years ago, we had a challenge from clients. It's like, we love the stories you tell about what, the services we could create in the future, but, the machinery doesn't work like that. And we're like, I don't understand your machinery. So we've been like, we need to understand the organizational, dynamics, people, process, systems stuff. And so that's something, and that I mentioned Marcia to you and Angela, and we brought in a lot of people and deepened that a lot. So I think the ability to work with organizations as almost the material of design just carries on. So that would be one thing. And then the other thing I think is being able to engage with the kind of the systems and understand at a system level what dynamics are going on. If we have an organization and it's in a policy context, it's in a market context, So that's something that we've seen we need to do with any of these sustainability challenges is understand what's pushing and pulling everything around beforehand. So you can't just go and talk to a bunch of users and come up with solutions. I think is what we're learning.
But I'm seeing like within Livework's I guess DNA, and within the team structures, there's roles there that are non, if you want, design. Like there's not, like there's sustainability experts and there's so forth. Like you're really, it's like you're building a different kind of a team, and that's, I'm saying different compared to other typical consultancies,
right.
That would be pitching for service design work that might just have design research, interaction design. It seems that there's a different formula and a different approach happening, and I'm keen to understand, like, is there something beyond this that you're hoping to see the rest of the design world catch up to? Because I believe like what you're doing at the moment is really interesting, and you're able to do what a lot of businesses wish they could do: take the risk, hire people who, in my mind, probably make the best designers. They're non-design trained,
right?
And you're able to bring the work in, and work in interesting projects. Is that a fair assumption, or have I completely missed the mark?
I think you've shined it. I mean, it sounds. I'm not sure if it's 100% true. I think we feel sometimes we're quite concentratedly designed, but it's quite a broad, more of a strategic design than we're definitely not in that kind of specialism that you were describing in certain ways. Most of the team are quite broad, and we have been. It's less a case of bringing in a sustainability expert and more a case of allowing a really good strategic design mind to broaden into a space. So we have another designer who's focusing on the relationship between service design and urban environments, and so it's that's probably more the approach we're taking. Because I'm aware that there's a lot of trends out there that I think we're definitely not leading around bringing design and business skills together and things like that.
So typically, whenever you're asked to come into businesses, what are the kind of things that they can expect to have happen when Livework arrive into the space? And I'm assuming there's permission to play, as we'd say. Like, how has your approach changed over the last 5 to 10 years?
So there's sort of two questions: what can they expect, and
what what has changed?
I mean, I'm gonna throw a client feed back at you for the what to expect, because it was just very satisfying. Recently, we're told that they felt like they got the kind of the collaboration and I guess they didn't get the arrogance of a consultancy, but they didn't get the I will just do what you say from an agency. They got the kind of the right level of challenge, but also the right level of like proactiveness. So I think the main thing I would expect is you get a team that wants to work with you to kind of fit into where you are, but also to push it forward in ways that are useful and not annoying. And then you can expect research and workshops and prototypes and
the fun stuff.
Fun stuff, yeah.
I mean, I was having a great. Go ahead.
How it's changed, I think I've sort of mentioned in a way how it's changed is we will do a lot. We'll go a lot more into understanding the organisation than we would have done 5 years before. Ago. Yeah.
So it seems like Livework is at a point, okay, whereas a lot of organisations mightn't be at that point. Okay, they might have spoken about sustainability.
Yeah.
They might have kind of realized that a change is afoot. We might need to do something about that. Organizations typically are a lot slower to respond. And when you bring service design in, it sounds like there's some deeper work going on, some deeper organizational work done by yourselves when you're in there. It takes a certain type of practitioner to be able to facilitate those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Something that really takes a special type of character as well. And I'm going to lean on a conversation where I had with Melissa Nova, who created a book called This Human a number of years ago. And I was chatting to Melissa the other day. And those design characters, to quote Melissa's new book, are really hard to find. I feel like, and it's making sure that when they go into those organizations, a lot of those conversations happen outside of the boardroom. Mm-hmm. They're not happening at the presentation pieces.
Mm.
Like when you're leaving the Livework DNA within the organization and they're having these conversations, and slowly they're permeating into the fabric of that organization. What I'm really keen to hear is, because I've spoken to some very impressive people in Livework, and again, I have no ties to Livework, but I found them to be very impressive. I'm really keen, and I kind of touched on it before about how you're handling the design culture. Okay. And I want to understand, is there something there that you can talk to other people about how they can ensure that they're hiring for the right design character? It's a hard question.
Yeah, it is a hard question. I think,
because it's not just skills. This is the thing, like, you can do a service design course and learn a lot of the methods that we use and stuff, but there's something beyond that.
Yeah. So I'm sort of latching on to you saying the Livework DNA. So we did, when we started the company, we always have sort of ever since been as interested in service as design. And what we found, and if sort of early on from reading the literature, that there's so much more literature about product and production than there is services, and that the idea of like how services are productive is still kind of, services are like the poor cousin in a way in the industrial world. So I think you see a lot of design which is I guess heavily weighted on the design, and we do have a culture which is really interested in service. So, and the idea that reorienting a company to think about the services they produce, or them actually being a service company. So I mean, some of my most satisfying work has been where that's been successful, where you've kind of got them to see, it's not just about the product, it's how do you get people there, how do you help them choose the right one, and how do you support them to get the most out of it, and when you say that kind of the kind of people and the kind of culture, I'm just thinking we've had a team that's been working with the British Parliament on the services that are provided to politicians and their staff, so basically kind of in a way plonky services like IT support, but also archiving and these these things. And our big win is getting them to think of themselves as a service provider and to orientate how they structure what they do around those services. And that shifts them from like throwing together bits of IT and disparate, uncoordinated, siloed activity. So I'd say that's it in a way for me. The culture is like, because if you're just about design, then you're mainly about your method.
Yeah.
But if you're about service, you're also about the design object. You're really concerned with like this thing and what it is and what makes it function in the same way that if you're a fashion designer, you're all about that garment. And
I love that. I love the separation. I've had a similar conversation with a few people over the last couple of years about that, and it's really true. Like, I think the service design practice is in love with the design side of things, and sometimes we forget that we're actually, believe it or not, designing service. So it's really refreshing to hear that.
And it's nice. It's a really great question for you because it helps to clarify. Because there is also there's this culture out there around digital product, and we've had quite a few discussions about like how do these things work together. You're seeing companies adopt digital product kind of mindset, language, process, and that's really important because they want to ship these things, and you need that kind of production methodology and mindset. So Luis in Livework Sao Paulo and I put this thing out. So what is the relationship between these two things? Service isn't always the answer, but it's kind of our answer. In a way.
Absolutely. So where's your own personal journey going in the next 5 years? Because, I can almost trace a line between your own personal growth and Livework's growth, and also the employees' growth, because I think you're attracting a certain type of practitioner into the business. Who are you reading at the moment, and what are you hoping to learn in the next 5 years, Ben?
Gosh. So I can do a bit of a plug here. So I with the ecological stuff, I've been reading a philosopher called Timothy Morton, and we're going to have a book club on LinkedIn as an experiment where we'll discuss this book he's written called Being Ecological. So he's kind of informed some of that thinking about how this book, he talks about how the whole shock and awe kind of ecological fear thing is not necessarily a useful way to approach things. So I guess that I feel like I could say that my journey is along those three velocities. That would be neat and tidy, wouldn't it? So there's an understanding journey and et cetera, et cetera.
Be too salesy though, Ben. We wouldn't do that.
It would be terrible. I mean, I'm still learning about this role, and I think we really need to learn. There's a lot of learning about on the back of this early thinking. So I'm really excited about this kind of, like, it is a hypothesis for us at the moment, and it does feel like a new lease of life for me. It was very exciting early on with Livework, where we said that this is what we think service design is, but we need to prove it. We need to sell it. We need to see the community grow. So I kind of feel like I'm at that point again. So there's definitely a bit of me that wants to be more practitioner again and think about how.
There's probably a sense of unlearning as well.
Yeah.
I think I'm hearing, and I'm doing pseudo therapy here, but there's a certain amount of unlearning, I think, for all of us, is what I'm hearing from the industry as regards what we need to do as practitioners for the next 5 years in particular, because it's not going. These challenges are only going to get bigger and bigger as the years go by. What do you think? What do you think in terms of the people coming into the business? What are the skills that you feel that you're going to need, like, outside of yourself? So if there's anyone from academia or education that are producing new talent, I'm really keen to hear your thoughts on what they should be doing more to cultivate excellence, because obviously, over the last decade or so, there's MAs of service design. And there's a lot more of those, and from what I'm understanding from a lot of those master's courses. They create really talented people, but there's something beyond that we need to maybe consider.
Yeah, just I'm remembering. I haven't done any teaching on the master's courses for
a while.
But it's a good question. I think there still seems to be I think the really interesting stuff is when it's multidisciplinary. So
absolutely.
I loved it. I was tutoring at the Royal College of Art, and there was a project that they did, which was between service design, automotive design, and the engineering teams at Imperial. So I guess learning how to work. I mean, it's in a way, it's kind of these 21st century skills agenda around project-based collaboration.
Yeah.
If you run a service design, I always felt like the best projects were the ones which were kind of done like student projects in the wild, and the students were learning how to work alongside
others,
an actuary or a nurse or an engineer, or that. And there is something that like one of the hardest things I find with what we do is just is the facilitation, of collaboration. How do you do that, and how might you do that we can do that at team level, and we try and do that within an organization. How do you do that at a sort of multi-organizational level? How might you have collaboration at a next system level of scale? We've had that would be it's sort of, I think, the dream. That's where the work needs to go. And if you look at some of the stuff, the kind of new trends in design, like this idea of mission-driven innovation, how does the design support that as kind of a key facilitator of those kind of challenges?
Okay, there's a whole host of things that we could probably go a little bit deeper on here, but I just want to ask one last question, because in 2001 you were reading an awful lot about the emergence of service at that point. And now we're at the point, and we're 2023 here when we're recording this, and we're kind of at a crossroads, in terms of how we operate moving forward. What have you changed in your own life over the last, say, number of years? Just, I'm interested because you're more well read than I am. You're more experienced in sustainability than I am, and from speaking to Gerry McGovern, who's a very good friend of mine,
great.
Yeah, I'd love to know. And again, you might kind of go, I'm still a work in progress. I haven't done enough. But I'd love to hear in terms of stuff that you maybe carried through into the business as well, and maybe made cuts in certain parts, or maybe you added things or things like that.
So do you mean like at a kind of personal lifestyle level, or
personal lifestyle level? Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm actually. So I feel like I'm in a fortunate position, and I have this building sense that, like, let's say that if the global 10% richest people, which includes us, consume something like 50% of the world's resources. So there's an interesting debate about is it personal responsibility or system level. But I think if you're in that group, you have the ability to make economic choices, then you should do things, and it's also a way to learn. So. And without feeling like bragging, I'm very lucky. We moved house last year, and it was a full renovation. So we've got a heat pump, and
nice.
There is no gas in the house. So it's a fossil-free zone, which is really,
that's awesome. Yeah,
it's very good for the sort of self-image. I'm afraid I bought a car in the pandemic. I was kind of proudly car-free and a car club user for a long time, but
you've bought a car. I mean, like, I know a number of people who've made huge sacrifices and sold houses and downsized and become free of that. But I'm really interested, like, for me in my own personal journey, we still have 2 cars in our house. Okay, it's really difficult. We've got 2 young kids, both under 6. And I've challenged my local council about this stuff. I've asked them, saying, hey, listen, look, you're talking about, on one hand, you don't want me to use my car. I said, but there's no public services for me to get from A to B in terms of the schools. And I could probably buy a cargo bike. But for anyone who's been to Ireland recently at the moment, or specifically Dublin, they're going through a huge transformation in the bike lanes at the moment. And I just don't feel safe enough to bring my two young kids out on the bike. So,
good for you, because I think stepping out of your own decisions and being politically active around it and helping
talk about it.
Realize. The other thing I've done, which is definitely a luxury, economic luxury. We've been traveling by train in Europe, which
was it good?
Can mean a 2-day trip to go and see the grandparents in Denmark. But it's good. It's good. It's
2 days. I know Joe, who wrote Engineering and Ends. Joe told me about where was he going?
He was going to Dundee from Stockholm, because I met him in Dundee, and he was like, never again.
Yeah. It took him a week. I don't know how long it took him, but he did it. And I know a number of people I think if you're in mainland Europe, things become a little bit more easier.
So I'm gonna sell it, actually. So what my emerging concept. So we went to Venice in the summer via Amsterdam, Munich, and then through the Alps on the train. And we had a 4-hour break roughly in Amsterdam and Munich. So I'm going to coin the phrase micro city break. Right? So you have just long enough to kind of walk through the central streets and eat something, and or go and see an exhibition even, and then get back on the train again, and using the sleeper train. And then we did go that route because you can go through the Alps from Munich
on the
to
train, which would
Italy.
be amazing.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, as I said,
we did on the way back. We were in that heat wave, so it was like 40 degrees on the train, and it was kind of hard work.
So you were sitting there looking out the window, kind of going, "Could have been an air-conditioned airplane here."
Exactly.
Well, look, Ben, I've covered off all my kind of questions here, and you're off the hook. I'm only joking.
Yeah.
It was really, really good finally chatting to you, and thank you for being so open and honest about a lot of the questions. As you see, some of them come from, but I really enjoyed speaking with you. So thanks so much for giving your time. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that? I know we've got a Typeform link that I'm going to throw a link in the show notes. Brilliant. For people to follow up and get involved with the three, not the Three Horizons.
Velocities, yeah.
Three Velocities. So I'll put a link to that one in the show notes. But if people want to get in touch with you directly, what's the best way for people to do that?
I'm pretty open on LinkedIn. I think that's the easiest way to find me. And
throw a link to that one in the show notes as well. And also a link to Livework as well to check out where you guys are at. Ben, thanks so much.
Thank you.
There you go, folks. I hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you enjoyed it and want to listen to more, why not visit thisishcd.com, where you can learn more about what we're up to and also explore our courses whilst you're there. Thanks again for listening.